Okay, we're live. Andrew, thank you very much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Um, it's been 4 weeks since we last spoke, um, and 2 weeks since I've done a live stream due to being ill last week. So just the sort of update news since I was last on, at least. We SWC have purchased 345 BTC in two separate purchases. And you've announced the launch of the Smarter Convert with TOBAM. Now, I'm sure most people seem to have moved on based on the questions they're submitting, but I would like to talk a little bit about that. Is there any sort of update on that since the launch?
Not so much as, we announced what Smarter Convert is. I think it took a day or two for everyone to sort of understand how positive it is. Everyone's seen that, we've used the capital to buy Bitcoin, which is good, particularly with how it seems to be moving at the moment. I'm really pleased with it. We've had a lot of inquiries about it. Not specifically about it, but in terms of people interested in it. I think I've said on other live streams that the next tranche that we do of Smarter Convert, whenever that may be, will be on slightly better terms for the company. So it's not like anything, nothing's set in stone. We were very keen to do it with TOBAM, and they were very supportive and helpful in getting it to be a real thing. I'm really proud that it's the first Bitcoin denominated bond in the UK, as far as I'm aware. Beneficial to shareholders in the sense that it's an equity placing, providing it converts at a better price than the time on the market, i.e. 5% above with the forced conversion aspect. But I think there's quite a bit higher that it could be priced, and I've got a number of different investors that are very, very keen to do it. I think we can only do something like 60 million more of it, so I'd be quite surprised if that isn't filled in the not too distant future. Whether it's before or after an equity raise, obviously I wouldn't be able to comment on. But yeah, I'm really pleased with it, and I think it's a really good product for the company. I don't think that a company would be very strong doing that without having a core amount of Bitcoin that had been bought, with equity. Because in the RNS, you'll see that I said we wouldn't go above 30% of our treasury exposed to that for prudent reasons. So I think that it's the right time to do it, i.e. placements, ATM, star facility, bond. And then we've got another thing that we're thinking about doing, which is even better actually than Smarter Convert, but obviously I can't talk about that at the moment.
You can't talk about it, but is there anything you can say about it?
No, I can't, I'm afraid, because if I gave you a few clues, then it would probably put it in a position where someone else might do it. And as far as I'm aware, no one else has done this in the world. So I'm quite excited about it, but my lips are sealed for the moment.
Innovating, I like it. So there's a few always. There's a few questions around the Smarter Convert. Essentially, I'm going to boil it into just two questions. How is it being marketed, and is there a one-pager that could maybe go on the website, a bit like the deck, so that it could be shared by other people other than just yourself?
Yeah, I'll speak to our advisors about sort of like a mini deck about it. Everyone's got the RNS, so they can see exactly what it's got. But I'll speak to them and see whether that's possible. Because it's quite an innovative product, it just falls into the conversations that we have with everyone all of the time. So we speak to lots of different people. constantly. Like yesterday, for example, I was in London for the day speaking to different institutional investors. We've been speaking to some of them for a period of time, hopeful that we're not that far away with some of them. And it just falls into those conversations. So it's not marketed any differently to how we market the Smarter Web Company as the overall proposition. It's just another option. There are some investors that cannot do a Bitcoin denominated bond. So some of the more traditional institutional investors, because they're not allowed to hold anything that's got that. They can hold an equity that may have exposure to Bitcoin, but they can't hold effectively a debt product that's denominated in the value of Bitcoin. So for us, it makes our jobs a lot easier, because rather than speaking to these new investors about one type of way they could support us, we've now got two types of ways that they could support us.
Excellent. On to the ATM then. There's been a few questions around this. Are there any plans to adjust the 20% cap on the daily ATM? And do you think Shard are doing a good job?
Yeah, so the second part of the question, Shard, I think they're doing a tremendous job, actually. I am very pleased with what they've done. When I look at the VWAP for the days against the days that they've sold it, they've almost always outperformed the VWAP, which is good. In terms of how we could tweak it, I don't know how you could tweak it to make it any better, in all honesty. I wouldn't want them selling more than 20%. I don't think that you want to go too much higher than that. I've heard some people say that you should go lower. I think 20% is round about the right number. Maybe we'll change it to 21%. In terms of the sort of the down days versus up days, I feel quite strongly about that. That we shouldn't use it on a down day. So I think that's probably right. What we'll probably do when we announce, the next tranche of it, which will be, sort of in the near future, hopefully. What we'll probably do is we'll probably start counting the shares as they get sold when we get the cash, whereas what we did on the first sort of placement agreement, which was split up into the tranches, is we added those shares onto our analytics dashboard at the start. So because the shares get issued at the start, they will go into the market cap figure that you see on other websites, because there'll be shares in issue. But we'll add them onto our analytics dashboard as they get sold, because I think it's more representative, i.e. you're putting the shares on when you put the proceeds of the shares on. So that's a tweak, I suppose. But broadly speaking, I think it will remain the same, because I think it's working very, very well for the company.
And then a sort of follow-on for that is people being pro ATM. We understand that it adds to the net asset value of the business, which ultimately raises the floor, etc. But there are a few people. This isn't just on X. This is also on the Discord Discord that would like to hear of a pause between ATM reloads to allow the share price to breathe for a bit, therefore making future ATMs more accretive because the share price has gone up. What are your thoughts on that?
I can understand why some people would think that, but for the medium to long-term success of the business, I personally don't think that it's the right thing to do. Therefore, we will not do it. I don't see what you'd benefit from with that, in all honesty. If you look at the marketplace as a whole, the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks or whatever it's been, MNAVs have been compressed across the board. As I've said before, I hold things like Metaplanet, and I was quite surprised actually when I woke up in the middle of the night and I had a look at Metaplanet share price, expecting it to be sort of flying, and it was down. I don't know where it finished because I haven't looked. So I don't think that we should do it differently than how we're doing it. I think it's fair, in my opinion, that the company can benefit from its MNAV. as well as the investors. That's why the 20% sort of limit is quite good. So yeah, I never want to give people bad news, of course, but I don't think that you'll be seeing a pause of the ATM.
Thank you. Back to the smarter convert, because I missed one of the questions. What's the minimum amount of BTC an individual can discuss with SWC for a smarter convert, or is it only institutions?
No, it's institutions or qualified investors. So there's a certain sort of threshold that you've got to have, and some other things to be a qualified investor, whether you're in the UK, the US. I don't think from a sort of an admin point of view that we would be able to do it with somebody who had less than, say, 10 or 15 Bitcoin, something along those lines. What we'd probably do is, if somebody had that sort of amount, is we'd bundle them in with some other people that have already contacted us with those sorts of amounts. So it might be the value of 50 Bitcoin, let's say, but with 5 different people that had subscribed for that. That value is above what the value could be if you went in the UK purely from a qualified investor point of view. But I think it's probably the right sort of number.
You mentioned subscription and or subscribed. Monday last week there was a subscription and placing. Can you explain to people the difference between the two? One was a high net worth individual, one wasn't. One was an institution. Just why the difference?
Yeah, the easiest way of thinking about it, in simple terms, is that they're the same thing. So a placing and a subscription are, in essence, the same thing. The company issues shares, the person pays for those shares. There are subtle differences. From our shareholders' point of view, I think what you would probably want to do is just think a placing means that it's done through a broker, and a subscription means that it's done direct with the company. So a subscription is better for the company because, all else being equal, there's less or no commission paid. Placings have got different amounts of commission dependent on where they come from, etc. So that's probably the way to think about it. Treat them as the same, but think a placing means it's come through the broker, and a subscription means that it's someone that's come direct to the company.
The news, or fairly recent news, of the UK giving the green light to Bitcoin ATMs. One question was, has that helped discussions with investors? And the other question was, does it present any concerns?
Yeah, so I'm quite encouraged by that. I wish it was ETFs rather than ETNs. I think that it's a very positive thing for the UK as a whole, because it means that the country is becoming more receptive to Bitcoin as an asset class. So that's really positive. Longer term, 6 months, 12 months, whatever. I think it's going to be a really beneficial thing for the company as well, because it makes it more accepted. It's as simple as that, really. In terms of the conversations with investors, then I think it helps as well, because it shows that the UK is becoming more forward-thinking. And you can then go back to the example of what happened in the States when they allowed ETFs. And you can all look at the price of strategy since then, which was pretty good. So yeah, it's a positive thing. Anything that makes Bitcoin more accepted is a great thing. And funnily enough, whilst I've noticed more people, whether it's retail investors, high net worth individuals, or the institutions, I've noticed more of them become more receptive to Bitcoin over this 3.5 month period. We still speak to a lot of people that don't have any Bitcoin exposure. So, the ETNs and the FCA giving the green light for retail investors to hold this is really positive.
And You mentioned previously that it's becoming harder and harder to buy Bitcoin. Are you able to talk about why that is and what's going on there?
Yeah, so when I said that before, I meant that it was harder to buy Bitcoin without the price seeming to go up. And I think since I said that comment, everyone can see that the price has gone up. And I believe that trend will continue. So when we buy the Bitcoin for the business, we obviously execute those trades as we think they should be done, and there's different ways that we do that. But when you're doing that, you do notice, even though we're not buying that much Bitcoin relative to some other people, you do notice what the market's doing. So this isn't like a technical analysis or something. I don't use that to look at Bitcoin. I've been looking at it for almost 10 years. So I look at it and I have my opinion on whether it's going up or down or whatever. And so that's all I meant by that. When I was executing the transactions, I could see that Bitcoin was looking harder to acquire without the price going up. Funnily enough, and people ask me this as well about the price of Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin, going down a good thing? Is it staying flat a good thing? But with the stage that we're at for the business, the very best thing that can happen is Bitcoin goes up. It makes it the value of what we hold up, and it also makes raising new capital easier. And in theory, the share price higher, so it's less dilutive. In real terms, i.e. the gain in the share price, the gain in the Bitcoin price. One thing that people don't often talk about as well is in all of our announcements, we announce the price of Bitcoin in pounds because we're a UK firm, so everything is done in pounds. But then we also put the current exchange rate for the price of what we've acquired, and also for the price of all of the Bitcoin that we've bought. And so people don't often talk about the exchange rate movements when they're talking about the price of Bitcoin and how that's changing. So, in very simple terms, if the price of Bitcoin goes up by 0.5% and the pound goes down against the dollar by 0.5%, Bitcoin hasn't really changed in value for us. So that's something that people should maybe start thinking about a little bit. It doesn't make a big difference in the grand scale of things, but when you're looking at the change on a quiet day of the price of Bitcoin, it's also important to look at the value of the pound against the dollar.
Yeah. Talking about raising equity, we haven't had an ABB for a while or a book build. Are they still part of the playbook?
Yeah, very much so. Everything that we've done today and more will be part of the playbook in the future. It's August at the moment, so it's not a great time to do an ABB. We've done a number of raises in August already. So ATM proceeds, the placing, the subscription that we talked about, Smarter Convert. So even though August is a quiet time, we've been quite encouraged by the number of meetings that we've been able to have, virtual and in person. I don't know when we'll do another ABB. Might be August, might be September. I honestly couldn't tell you, and if I did know, I wouldn't be able to say anyway. I've been very excited over conversations that I've been having over the last couple of weeks with a massive American bank. I don't know whether that will be like an ABAB style thing or whether it be a placing or something else, a subscription. So that's quite encouraging as well. So yeah, all of the capital raising tools that we've used today are very much in place, and it's my job to specifically on the placings and the subscriptions and the ABB side of things to think about what that flow of investors look like, and then to think about how I want to do it, how I want to structure it, whether I want to bundle people together, and so on and so forth.
And how are conversations going with UK institutions, or is it still mostly kind of global?
No, actually, I'd probably say that I've had more meetings with UK institutions than global institutions recently, which is quite encouraging. A lot of them sort of, quite early on in the decision-making process in terms of whether or not they want to get involved in this space. They're thinking about which company they would want to, support. Most of them don't want to support numerous companies. So I think that's quite good. One of the meetings that I had yesterday was with an analyst and 2 fund managers, a micro cap fund manager, and then the next size up. We're not so much in that micro cap space anymore. But the discussions that we've had with those people feed into other people in their organizations. It's probably the first time actually the last few weeks when I can say that I'm having more conversations with institutions in the UK than overseas. Overseas is still mega important to us though, because particularly take America, there's so much more capital there. It's really important to us. We're trying to get the UK institutions on board slowly but surely.
And Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, that was good actually. Really good. They're massive as well. Obviously, I haven't disclosed who it was with, so we'll probably leave that one there.
Okay. When will SWC be listed on the NASDAQ? Are there any such plans?
There's no concrete plans for that. I'm very proud that we're a British company. We're listed in the UK. We're, the company's a UK company. Most of the team are from the UK, live in the UK. I think maybe longer term we might look at a dual listing. It's something like the NASDAQ. It's probably a step up from the OTC. It's certainly not going to be a 2025 job. I think we'd have to be very careful about how we position ourselves globally if we did do a dual listing or however it was structured, because I'd want to be, shouting sort of loud and proud about the UK, and I wouldn't want to lose, that side of things. It might make it a bit easier to get some of that, institutional capital from certain funds in the US. Although to be fair, the discussions that I'm having at the moment, they're, quite to the surprise of our UK advisors, they're actually perfectly comfortable with investing in Aquis in the UK because they can see what we're doing as a business. And then of course, we've got other plans of, where we may be listed in the not too distant future in the UK too. Potentially.
Okay. I mean, that kind of is about all I'm going to get on that, isn't it?
Yeah, we should probably move on, actually. I probably shouldn't have digressed.
Right. Moving on then. Acquisitions. Two questions. Can we get into the nitty-gritty of acquisitions? And the other being, would you consider buying another treasury if they're trading below NAV?
Yeah, so I had a long conversation with somebody about that last point yesterday. So we'll cover that one. But first, let's talk about the core operating business and the acquisition strategy. So as I put out on X earlier today, I've spent the morning doing 4 interviews, 8, 9, 10, and 11. I almost was late to meet you today because the last one overran. So that's really important because we want to grow the operating business. As everyone said, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. The way I've described it is it's been moderately successful for 15 years. It's been profitable. But the most important thing is that there is quite easy growth potential there. So I'm pleased with how it's going at the moment. And I've got a very robust plan of how I'm going to ramp that up, hopefully fairly quickly. So that's the operating business. The acquisition strategy. So full transparency, that's changed quite a bit since we listed. I had a conversation with a good company that I was considering looking at, very, very informal discussion, just trying to find out whether it would work right at the start of listing. That company wouldn't be appropriate to acquire anymore because it would be too small. It wouldn't be worth doing. So the acquisition strategy has broadened since then. Conceptually, it's still the same. So if you think that Bitcoin, in our opinion, is likely to do 30% every year forever, sometimes less, sometimes more, but on average, that's the figure that we use internally. You wouldn't want to buy a business that isn't going to pay you back in much more than 3 years. And also, as per our operating business, you want something that's low risk. So you don't want to have something that's going to create a problem for you. So you basically want something that is low risk, that's going to throw off cash, then you can look at that. So we've got some things that we're doing internally that I'll be able to share in due course about how we're going to try and speed that side of things up. But we'll only ever do that when it's right for the business. So if it doesn't happen for years, that's because we're trying our best and we can't find anything that we can structure in a way that we believe will be beneficial to our shareholders. But clearly, if you can do what I've talked about there, then it's incredibly beneficial for the shareholders, because after 3 years or thereabouts, you're just creating cash that you can use for your treasury to grow your balance sheet further, to repeat that process time and time again. That's the key thing that people are starting to understand by having a very good treasury policy, that you can have a very strong balance sheet, and that gives you options as a business. So yeah, we're doing a lot on all of those different fronts. Most of it we don't or can't talk about in any more detail. But the strategy, as per what we listed with in the admission document, is broadly the same as it was. It's just a little bit bigger now.
Thank you. I heard you talking on Tim Cotsman's live stream, and you kind of mentioned some nearer term targets, but it was asked, and I think people would like to have maybe like an end of year guesstimate as to where we might be going.
Yeah, so again, being completely honest with you, I kind of regret saying that, because it's very difficult to put a number on it at the end of the year. So I could put a number on it, like I did, as my opinion of where we may get to. But one thing could change that. So one of the conversations that I'm having at the moment would blow it out of the water. So it's quite hard to do that. So I think, and I've been thinking about this a lot since Tim's event, maybe the sensible thing to do is just to have a meaningful target, which is basically double the previous target. So if that's what we decide on, the current target's 4,200 Bitcoin, not at the end of the year, hopefully way before the end of the year, and then 8,400 and so forth. Tim made a very good point that strategy never has a target. Their mission, which is the same thing that I've always said, is to buy as much Bitcoin forever. So I don't know the answer, and we need to debate it more internally. Maybe we'll have some sort of a target. I don't really know, if I'm honest, about that side of things. As long as I can believe that I'm trying to do better every single week, and making progress and demonstrating the progress to the shareholders, then I think that's probably quite important. You don't want to do too much backward looking stuff, but if you compare, say, our 30-day yield, it's pretty healthy still. It's not quite 100%, but it's still healthy. And as you get bigger, it's particularly in a quiet month like August, that is going to effectively slow down a little bit, but it will still be very, very impressive in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you still bought more Bitcoin than Strategy this week, didn't you? I think
Yeah,
I'm right in
because
saying
we
that.
love Michael Saylor, we wouldn't want to talk about that, because like every single week he buys more than us. So
Yeah,
maybe we did it 1 week out of
you got to
however
take.
many. He's got a lot more capital at his disposal than us, and the
Yeah,
guy's a legend. So we wouldn't want to say that, but yeah, it was quite cool, wasn't it?
yeah. I think that's what I was trying to say. Um, are you thinking about employing an investor relations individual to help optimize your time?
So we've got an executive assistant that's starting in the early part of September, and that will be tremendously helpful, because that will enable me to shave hopefully a couple of hours out of my day and then do other things that people think that I do, as opposed to some of the things that people probably don't realize that I have to do, which is planning travel, managing my diary, setting up live streams, all the the sort of the things that people probably just think that happen. So that would be great. I'm very much looking forward to that, and that will also assist with some other people in the team, to allow them to shave a bit of time out of their day and do more of the things that can really help drive us forward. I work very closely with Jesse, and we get on really well, and I'm so pleased that he's so happy in our company. He's been tremendously helpful on that side of things, and I would think that with the recruitment of the EA and what Jesse and I do, I think that we'll probably be okay on that side of things in the shorter term. The marketing manager that we're getting on board, hopefully fairly soon, they're obviously going to do a lot of the stuff on the operating business, but some of the role is the PLC responsibilities. So that will complement the work that Jesse and I do on that as well. So I think we've got roughly the right sort of team structure almost in place for that side of things. But like everything, we constantly review that to see how we can make that better. We've got another new hire that we'll be able to talk about in the not too distant future, which is really, really good. And there's a bit of overlap there as well. So yeah, I think the plan that we've got at the moment is good. But I look at everything all of the time. I constantly question what we've done, what we're doing, and how we can make it better, faster, bigger. And yeah, I'll keep looking at it. One thing that we've never done as a company is we've never employed a PR agency. I don't think we'll change that either. I think it's just a cost. I think we can do a lot of that with the people internally, and then it's people who are very passionate about it. That it's not just a client. But yeah, I'll look at it. I did see the question online about that thing, and I think that's what I'd say to that question at the moment.
Are SWC going to adopt quarterly results more like the US, and market updates, earning calls, that kind of thing, or is the next update kind of year end?
Yeah, so that is largely derived from the system that we've got in the UK, which is biannual reporting. So you do your half years and then you do your annual. I don't think we'll change that in up until the next period, which will probably come out February or March next year. So the period end is October. And that's when we'll do our AGM as well, which we'll try and make into a good event for everyone, most likely anyway. So I think probably after we get to that point, then we could do sort of a trading update in those, two gaps, to make it effectively a quarterly update. I think I'll speak to the team about that and see whether we can do that from a regulatory point of view and also an operating point of view. So yeah, it's a good suggestion, but the reason why we do biannual updates in the UK is that's what the system is.
And just going back to this kind of marketing, what future marketing plans do SWC have to get into more mainstream media, FT, Investors Chronicle, Money Week, etc.?
Yeah, so I was reading The Times this morning. So I do read some of the mainstream media. And I was really disappointed, actually. It's one of the lead stories on the business section today, where they've got a bit of PR that's obviously come out of Rolls-Royce, saying how they are keen to become the biggest company in the UK, which is where AstraZeneca are, which is basically them doubling. And I was reading it and I was thinking, this is so disappointing that not once has the Times written an article about the Smarter Web company, as far as I'm aware anyway. And we have been pretty successful in the UK. We have been doing something positive for the capital markets in the UK. And we are a pretty well performing equity on the global stage at the moment. So I think the only thing that I can do to change that is what I've built into the role for myself, Jesse, the executive assistant and the marketing manager, which is to more proactively reach out to these people and try and get them interested in what we're doing, and to understand that we're building something that we believe will be one of the biggest companies in the UK, and to try and get that sort of coverage, but not just on the print side of things or what's now online, but also on the video side of things. I remember when I did that CNBC interview, and I'd like to do more like that. So we have had some of those people. When I was in Abu Dhabi, actually, I had a message from Bloomberg starting to get interested in what we're doing. So I think it's just a case of making sure that we get out there and we tell all these people as much as we can what we're doing, and try and get their interest so that they will write stories about us. Specifically on the FT, the last thing that I saw them publish was almost positive about Bitcoin treasury companies. So maybe the tide's turning there as well. So we'll just keep trying to sort of get the message out there, and hopefully they'll start to cover us a little bit more, because I think it'd be really beneficial, not just for the company but also for the people that then find out about us.
And then fun question, what's your preferred meme? Is it we're doing okay, or they're not laughing now?
I like them both. I like them both. I think they're doing okay is quite good. I think they're not laughing now is quite an underused one. Because if you cast your mind back to when we listed, no one was really that interested in the UK. People globally were interested, of course, but not the retail investors here, but the institutions. And now it's quite funny when we go and see them all, because they can see that we're doing something that's really, really positive, and it's, even though it's only been 3.5 months, it's starting to become a bit more mature. So if I had to pick one at the moment, I'd probably say they're not laughing now.
And did you, this is kind of an open question, did you have any other stuff that you wanted to talk about today, bring up, looking forward, looking back, I don't know?
Yeah, it's a good question, that one. I think I'd just like to sort of say to people how I feel about the company, because we're all individual people and we've all got our own perception of things at any point in time. But I look at the company right now and appreciate that I'm the CEO, so I've got complete visibility over everything that we're doing, and I couldn't be more excited. And I'm working harder than I've ever worked at the moment. It's amazing. I feel that we're way stronger than we were a month ago, and I'm very excited about what we're doing at the moment and what we'll be able to share with people in the coming sort of weeks on that. But then also as an investor, in Bitcoin for 10 years, in equities for 25 years, sometimes successfully, sometimes not very successfully. What we're seeing at the moment is just the same old thing that we see all the time. Things get a bit quieter over the summer, people don't take advantage, share prices then bounce back, start of September, end of August. Everyone says, I wish that I bought a load then. I being the CEO of a public company now and having the visibility that I've got and understanding how things move, I've got complete compassion for people that might, want to trade their shares right now. But for me, as a sort of a medium to long-term investor, I'm mega bullish about everything right now. I think the other thing that is worth remembering as well, because we're all used to the Bitcoin cycles, but it appears from what we can see that the Bitcoin treasury company cycles are like everything else in Bitcoin treasury land, just magnified. So they're a lot shorter. You get what you would get in 4 years, in 4 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it may be. So that compression is something that people need to be aware of, and what Saylor's always said so well is that the volatility is the thing that gives you the performance. So the volatility helps the company, and the volatility gives the investor the potential performance. So I think that's my observation of things at the moment. And it's not something that we talk about that much, but it's something that is quite an interesting thing for everyone to think about. And the caveat there is that there are no guarantees for the future for anything, particularly investing. But that's my observation on events right now.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I said we'd keep this to 40 minutes so that you can get on with your day. Really appreciate you taking the time as always, and I'm looking forward to the news that's coming out in the coming weeks.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, James.
Thanks everyone for watching.